The forks caught the evening light just right, like they were proud of their shine. The napkins were folded into crisp triangles, and the roast sat steaming in the center, surrounded by golden potatoes and soft rolls that still held the scent of butter. I'd spent all afternoon making it perfect, maybe too perfect. I sat down last, smoothing my dress with one hand, looking around the table. Everyone was there, technically, bodies in chairs, plates in place. But something felt hollow, like we were all actors in a play no one wanted to watch. Jacob reached for the salt. She passed him the gravy. No one looked at me. The silence stretched, not loud, but tight. The kind of quiet you feel more in your chest than your ears. I lifted my spoon, but my hand paused halfway. I knew something was coming. I just didn't know what. But I could feel it, sitting right there with us, settling in beside the rosemary and the roast. Her voice didn't rise, didn't snap or shake. "You're just old, not important," she said, like she was commenting on the weather. The words didn't hit, they slipped. Hot and slick, like oil in a pan that burns before you smell it. My shoulders stiffened. My spoon stayed midair. I didn't look up. I just stared at the casserole I'd made with extra time because she once said she liked it that way. The crust was perfect, or it had been. Now it looked overdone. I saw the edges curling in, shrinking from the dish. No one said anything, not even Jacob. The candle flickered between us, its tiny flame unsure whether to stay. I blinked, slowly, my throat tightened. I still didn't speak. I reached for my napkin, not because I needed it, but because my hands needed something to do. Folded it slowly, edge to edge, smoothing the seam with trembling fingers. The fabric was soft, worn from use. It used to cover Jacob's lap when he was still small enough to sit beside me. Now it looked too small. Like me, in that moment. I pressed it into my lap, not wiping my mouth, but hiding my hands. And I held my breath, just long enough to keep my dignity inside my chest. Jacob passed the butter. He didn't look at me, not once. His fork scraped against the plate as he cut into the roast. Clink, scrape, swallow, repeat. Each sound hit harder than her words. He could have said anything. "Mom, that's not fair," or even just my name. But he stayed quiet, and in that silence, something cracked. Not loud, but deep. A mother knows when her child stops reaching for her. I felt it right there, between the dinner rolls and the silence that tasted like ash. The kitchen felt tighter than it had an hour ago. I looked around at the counters I used to lean on while baking cookies, at the fridge still covered in magnets, and school pictures I'd helped hang. Now the warmth of the room pressed against me, too much and not enough. I reached for my water. My fingers wrapped around the glass, cool and solid. But they felt numb. It wasn't just what she said, it was what she meant. I wasn't welcome here anymore. Not in this kitchen, not in this silence. I stayed for dessert, not because I wanted pie. I didn't even taste it. I needed time. Time to gather whatever was left of my spine and walk out without showing the break. I smiled, the kind of smile that holds everything in place. Your chin, your pride, your heart. When I stood, my legs moved on their own. Slow, steady. No one stopped. Me. No one asked me to stay, but when I stepped outside, something in me didn't come with me, something that used to believe this was still home. The dishes were wrapped one by one in old pillowcases. I used the soft ones, the ones I'd saved for holiday guests. My blue-flowered china hadn't seen the light of day since Jacob was in college, but I polished every plate, every cup, like I was sending off a part of myself. The kitchen smelled of lemon oil and warm cardboard. Sunlight moved across the counter as I worked, slow and golden. "These are beautiful," she said, watching me from the doorway. "They were my mother's," I replied, folding the last saucer gently. "We used them for Thanksgiving and Easter. Now, I want you to have them." She smiled, polite. "Thank you." It wasn't just gratitude I gave her. It was trust. It was family. It was a quiet welcome into the circle of everything I loved. I taped the box shut and pressed my hand to the top. My heart ached, but I didn't show it. You don't give away heirlooms unless you believe you're building something with them. The paper was yellowed and soft at the edges. I remember the way it crinkled as I unfolded it, laying it on the desk, like something sacred. My father's name was still there, neat and strong, in his old ink. Jacob leaned forward, eyes scanning the deed. "This was his?" I nodded. "He signed it over to me the year before he passed. Told me, 'It's yours. Now, make it matter.'" I thought I was. My hands trembled as I slid it across the desk toward the lawyer. "I want to transfer the name," I said. "Let them start fresh." Love made it easier to let go. At least that's what I told myself. Can still hear the drawer closing when they filed it away. A soft click. Final, but quiet. And I remember thinking, Daddy's voice still echoed in those floorboards. Would they ever hear it? Jacob was fidgeting with the flower on his lapel. His hands were shaking just a little, and he couldn't quite get the pin to sit right. "Here, let me," I said, stepping in, smoothing his collar and fastening the boutonniere with careful fingers. He gave a nervous laugh. "Thanks, Mom. I looked him over and smiled. "This is your beginning." And it was. I remember handing her the box with my mother's gold earrings inside, my wedding day gift to her. She gasped when she opened it. "These are too much," she whispered. "They're yours now," I said. "Just take care of them." The church bells rang in the distance, and I watched as my boy walked down the aisle toward a future I hoped would hold us all. I gave them everything that day: money, prayers, legacy. It felt like stitching myself into their story. I didn't know I'd be written out of it later. The door was propped open when I arrived. I stepped inside, carrying the cinnamon pie with both hands, careful not to let the foil slide. The house smelled like fresh paint, sharp and clean. The floors were still dusty, and the curtains hadn't gone up yet, but the place buzzed with possibility. "I brought dessert," I called, placing the pie on the counter. She looked up from a pile of folded towels. "Oh, thank you." The windows were open, letting in a breeze that smelled like cut grass and new beginnings. I looked around, that empty living room, bare except for a toolbox and a broom. And I felt proud to have given them this space, proud to imagine the laughter that would fill these walls. I didn't know then how fast warmth can fade. But that day, I believed this was the start of something good, and I clung to that belief like it was enough. We were sitting on the porch late in the evening. My tea had gone lukewarm in my hands, but I still cradled the mug like it gave me something. "I want to give you some money," I had told them weeks earlier. "To help get started," she gasped. "You don't have to." "I want to," I'd said, and I did. I truly did. But deep down, I think I hoped that kind of giving would keep me close, that it would earn me a seat at the table I helped build. Now, with the wind brushing past the wind chimes, I realized I had given too much, too freely, and in doing so, I'd made myself invisible. I sipped my tea, bitter now. I didn't ask for it back. I never would. But looking back, I wish I'd called it a loan. At least then, I would have still been owed something. There's a path I used to picture in my mind, a little wooden bridge between their life and mine. I built it with casseroles, babysitting offers, a down payment, and the keys to my father's house. I thought if I kept giving, they'd keep crossing it back to me. But love doesn't always work that way. One morning, I stood by the window, watching spring trees sway outside. The scent of daffodils drifted in. It was beautiful. Still, I thought about all I gave and how they took it with thank yous and silence. I built the bridge and they walked across it, and they never turned back. I smiled when they left. I always smile, because it's not in me to slam a door. But deep down, I knew. Some bridges only go one way. The sidewalk was still warm beneath my shoes. I could feel it through the soles, soft, steady heat from a spring day winding down. The breeze carried jasmine and something faintly damp, like the earth had been thinking about rain. I hummed a little, just a tune I didn't name, as I shifted the weight of the lemon bag in my arm. It was my little ritual. That walk after lunch, when my knees behaved and my chest didn't feel too tight. A loop past the park, 2 slow turns, around the corner lot with the blue hydrangeas. I always came home with lemons, even if I didn't need them. Just something about holding a bag of lemons made the world feel normal. The sun was low, the birds were quieting, and my porch came into view. I smiled to myself. I didn't know I was walking back to a locked door and not a home. I didn't know everything I trusted was already shifting beneath my feet. The key slid in, just like always. But when I turned it, something caught my eye. I pulled it back, tried again, slower this time. It stopped hard. I jiggled the knob, adjusted my grip. Nothing. I leaned into the door, pressing my hand flat against it. The wood felt cooler than it should have, like it had already made up its mind to shut me out. "Hello?" I called out, not too loud, but enough. "It's just me." I waited. Nothing. I tried again, softer. "Can you open the door?" Still, nothing. Not even footsteps, no creak of the floor, no shadow behind the glass. My hand started to shake just a little, so I placed my palm on the frame to steady it. I leaned forward, rested my forehead against the door's grain. Her name slipped out, barely a whisper. I didn't even realize I'd said it until the silence answered back. That silence, it was thick, like the door had grown ears and decided not to listen. The window beside the porch still had the sheer curtain drawn halfway. I stepped off the mat and looked through, careful not to fog the glass with my breath. And there they were. My brown slippers, tucked right beside the heater where I'd left them. I always kept them there, toes pointed in like little prayers. My coat still hung on the hook. And there, on the kitchen counter, were my reading glasses, resting just where I set them after the paper. Everything was still mine, still warm, still lived in. And yet, I couldn't get in. The light above the stove glowed soft. A gentle hum floated through the window, probably the dishwasher or the old fridge compressor. Pressed my hand to the glass. It felt warm from the inside. It's a terrible thing, to be shut out of a space that still smells like your breath, your books, your lotion. That still holds your slippers like it's expecting you home. I waited. At first I stood. Then I sat. On the front step, the bag of lemons beside me. My knees ache a little, but I didn't mind. I kept listening for something. A shuffle, a voice, even a raised window. Anything that might explain. But the longer I sat, the quieter it all got. The wind picked up and tugged gently at my sleeve. A car passed down the block, its radio low and humming. Somewhere a door closed, not mine. No knock, no message, not even a note on the door to say they'd be back soon. Nothing. It was the kind of silence that doesn't feel empty. It feels like a decision, like something already made up its mind. And it wrapped around my throat slowly, not choking, but pressing. Like it wanted me to understand. Without saying a word, I stayed. I don't know why. Hope, maybe. Or a habit. Maybe both. The sun disappeared behind the trees, and the sky dimmed to that soft purple that always makes the porch look warmer than it is. I watched the streetlights blink on, one by one, like stars trying to remember their job. But the porch, light, it didn't come on. I waited, wrapping my arms tighter around myself, a sweater pulled up over my hands. I counted to 20, then to 100. Still dark. No bark from the dog, no sound of Jacob's car. Nothing from inside. I wasn't angry, I wasn't crying. I just sat still. Real still. After a while, I stopped feeling like a person sitting on a porch. I felt more like the porch itself, still, ignored, a part of the background. It used to come on right before sunset, every single evening. Jacob would set it with that old dial timer in the laundry room. Said he didn't want me fumbling in the dark. I looked up at the empty socket above me, the one that should have glowed, but it didn't. The bulb was fine. The timer hadn't slipped. It wasn't broken. It was off. And suddenly, I understood everything. Not through anger, through the absence of care, through the decision not to light a way home. The shadows stretched long across the grass. A bat flitted overhead. The neighborhood quieted into that hush only spring can carry, soft, cooling, still. I looked straight at that bulb and whispered to myself, I see. Not bitter, just honest. Because that darkness said more than any of them ever would. The bench was old, chipped on one end, and colder than I expected. Jacob sat first, leaving a space between us that wasn't just wood. He hadn't picked our usual diner. He hadn't invited me home. He chose this: open air, tired trees, and a place without memories. I watched a squirrel dart past our feet and disappear into the rustling brush. The leaves drifted down like they knew their time was up. He cleared his throat. Thanks for meeting me here. I nodded, but my mouth stayed shut. He wouldn't look at me, not once. His eyes were on the path, on his hands, on anything but the woman who raised him. The silence between us stretched like the space between strangers. I knew then this wasn't a reunion. This was a boundary. And that bench, it wasn't just a seat. It was a line drawn between who we'd been and what we'd never be again. Let's not make this a thing, he said. His voice was soft, practiced, like he'd rehearsed it in the mirror that morning. My heart dropped before I even answered. A thing? I asked. Is that what this is to you? He shifted on the bench, pulling his jacket tighter against the breeze. I mean, what happened? It wasn't personal, just complicated. I looked at him, really looked. The man I rocked to sleep, who once brought me dandelions in chubby fists, now sat beside me, explaining away cruelty like it was a kitchen mishap. He added, It just got out of hand, and I stopped him with a glance. You locked your mother out of her home. His mouth opened, then closed. The wind picked up. A jogger passed by, earbuds in, oblivious. I watched his lips move again, but I couldn't hear him anymore. Not really. My heart had started drifting, pulling, back from someone I never thought I'd have to protect myself from. I folded my hands in my lap. Slowly. My mother always said, keep your hands still when your heart wants to scream. So I did. Fingers locked tight, thumbs pressed together, not fidgeting, not wiping my eyes, not clutching my sweater like I wanted to. But inside? Inside, something shifted. The part of me that had held his first lost tooth, who'd stayed up through his fevers and football heartbreaks, that part started to crack. He sat beside me like a stranger on a train, not cruel, not angry, just polite. And that broke me more than yelling ever could, because when love turns quiet, you realize how loud it once was. He kept talking, about moving forward, about how things happen. His words sounded like leaves, skimming pavement, harmless, dry, and too quick to catch. I think we just need time, he said, to settle into what this new chapter is. I waited, I kept waiting, but the word never came. Not once did he say, "I'm sorry." And I listened closely, like it might be hidden in another sentence, tucked inside something about change or transition. It wasn't, and its absence rang louder than anything else he'd said. Sometimes the words you don't say take up the most space. And that day, the space between us became permanent. He didn't ask, not where I'd stayed, not how I'd slept. He didn't wonder if I was cold or scared, or if the porch step bruised my hip. He just talked around it, like if he didn't say it out loud, it wouldn't count. But it did. Every word he avoided became a bruise I had to carry alone. I realized then I wasn't his mother anymore. Not really. It was a problem that had been managed. I looked at his hands. Strong, clean, and completely folded into his own life. "I'm glad we talked," he said. I smiled. But it wasn't joy. It was grief. The kind that comes when you're still alive and already erased. He stood up first, brushed imaginary dust from his pants, didn't touch my arm, didn't ask if I was walking too. He just nodded once. "Take care, okay?" I nodded back. "You too." He turned, walked toward the path. His figure gets smaller with each step. I didn't call after him, didn't chase. I sat there feeling the bench cool beneath me, listening to the birds begin their evening song. Watching the breeze lift the last leaves from the path. I stayed until the sun dipped just below the trees. Sometimes love means letting them go, even when they don't look back. Was already stirring cream into my coffee when she slid into the booth like no time had passed. Dolores. Her coat still smelled like cloves, just like it used to when we'd bake in her kitchen. "Morning," she said simply, as if we hadn't left off with 3 months of silence. "Didn't expect to see you," I said, quieter than I meant to. Her smile was softer now. Older, maybe, but still hers. The light from the blinds drew long stripes across the table, catching on her rings. "I figured you might need a warm drink," she said, nodding toward the counter. The waitress was already pouring cider into 2 mugs. I hadn't told anyone where I'd been staying. I hadn't talked much at all. But Dolores, well, she's known my whole story, even the parts I pretend I forgot. She didn't say sorry. I didn't ask her to. Sometimes the right people just show up when your own map runs out of ink. She slid the mug across the table. The steam curled between us like a question. "Cider. Still your favorite?" I nodded, hands wrapping around the warm ceramic. The smell hit me before the heat did. Cinnamon, orange peel, that touch of clove again. I took a slow sip. It burned my tongue a little, but not in a bad way. It reminded me I was still here. I closed my eyes for just a moment, breathing it in. The clink of silverware, the murmur of the booth behind us, the far-off crackle of someone's newspaper. "It tastes like fall," I whispered. Dolores smiled over her rim. "It tastes like waking up." She was right. Something had gone quiet. Inside me, the night that porch light never came on. But here, with steam rising between us and cider on my tongue, I felt the first flicker of warmth come back. Not loud. Not suddenly, but sure. And that was enough for now. She said it while slicing a biscuit in half. Not dramatic, not pointed. Just one sentence folded into conversation. "You're still on the deed, you know." I blinked. My fingers paused, gripping the edge of the sugar packet. "What?" I asked, not out of disbelief, but because I needed to hear it again. She set her knife down, eyes steady. "Your name's still on the title. They can't sell it. They can't even rent it without you. It landed heavy, not like an accusation, like a key." I looked down at the napkin she'd been doodling on, where she'd written out a lawyer's number in her old slanted script. My name was still on the deed, still mine. For a long time, I'd convinced myself I had nothing left. No power, no voice, no space. But in that sunlight-drenched diner, next to chipped ceramic sugar jars and half-eaten toast, I remembered something. I'd never actually let go. And maybe I didn't have to. Dolores leaned in, elbows on the table, her eyes narrowing just slightly. "You're not stupid, you know." "I never said I was," I replied, though my voice lacked bite. She shook her head. "You let them walk all over you, not because you didn't know better, but because you thought being kind meant staying quiet." That one hit. I stared down at my folded napkin. "I thought keeping the peace would fix it all," I said. She softened. A bit, leaned back. "Kindness is no reason to be foolish." The hum of the coffee machine kicked on behind us. A bell rang as someone walked in. I wrapped my pain in politeness, I whispered. Folded it neat, tucked it under the table. Dolores didn't smile. She just nodded. "Unfold it, honey. Let it breathe. You've earned that much." And for the first time in months, I believed her. She wrote the number with a steady hand, big letters, like she wanted to make sure I could see it even if I didn't want to. "There," she said, pushing the napkin across the table. I stared at it. That napkin could have held anything, crumbs, spills, nothing at all. But today, it held a door. I picked it up carefully, folded it once, then slipped it into my purse beside a travel tissue and an old peppermint. "Call him," she said gently. "Just talk. Just ask." I nodded, the motion small but certain. Around us. The diner had quieted. Our mugs were nearly empty. The late morning light slanted through the blinds like a soft spotlight, resting on my lap. I felt it there, that flicker in my chest. That tiny pulse of return. It wasn't just a number. It was mine, and oh, how I had missed being mine. The office smelled like pine cleaner and old paper, sharp and steady, like something freshly scrubbed but still holding history. The blinds let in just enough sunlight to make the air feel warmer than it was. I sat across from the lawyer, my coat still folded neatly in my lap, hands resting on top of it. The brass clock on the wall ticked with slow precision. Not impatient, not rushed, just certain. "I'm ready to move forward," I told him. My voice didn't waver. It wasn't loud, but it carried. He nodded, slid the folder toward me. This wasn't a request. It wasn't a plea. It was a reclaiming. I wasn't there to fight. I was there to finish something that had already begun the day they changed the locks and forgot I existed. I didn't need anyone to tell me I had the right. I already knew. And that room, still, clean, expectant, felt like the right place to write a new beginning. Each page held it. My name, still there, still mine, not scribbled, not erased, not replaced. It was right where it had always been, in print, in ink, in the foundation of that house. I'd signed it once with a hopeful heart, passing it along like a gift that would come back to me in kindness. But now I signed again. Not with bitterness, not with regret, just clarity. The pen moved in my hand like it knew where to go. No trembling, no pause. I could hear the scratch of it on the paper, soft but sure, like a line being drawn not just on the page, but in my life. There was no emotion in the air except resolve. He passed me the next document, and I signed that. 2. Not to prove anything, not to hurt anyone, just to return to myself. That name, that ink, they'd always been mine. When they walked in, I stood, out of habit maybe, or maybe just to meet them eye to eye. "Thank you for coming," I said, but it wasn't polite. It was direction. I handed her the notice. Her fingers shook slightly as she took it. Jacob didn't meet my gaze. He looked at the chair legs, the baseboard, anywhere but at me. I didn't flinch. "I'm enforcing the deed," I said simply. No accusation, no anger, just the truth. Her face was drained of color. His jaw tightened. I didn't soften. I didn't raise my voice. I stood there, calm, steady, watching them absorb what they never thought I'd say. My heart ached, but not out of guilt, out of release. There's a kind of dignity in saying what needs to be said without raising your tone. That day, my silence carried more power than any speech could, and it held the line where love once lived. I could have added more. I could have reminded them what I'd given up, what they'd taken, how they'd left me. But I didn't. I just said, "You have 30 days." That was enough. Her lips parted, but no words came. She clutched the paper like it had burned her palm. Jacob still didn't speak. The room stayed quiet, filled only with the soft rustle of legal sheets and the whisper of their own disbelief. Didn't gloat. I didn't explain, because I didn't need them to understand anymore. This wasn't punishment. This was protection. Of myself. Of the parts of me I'd let fray for far too long. I sat back down and folded my hands again. 30 days. That was fair, that was the line, and for once I wasn't the one crossing it. The signed copy slid into my purse with a quiet thud, not dramatic, not final, just complete. I rose from the chair slowly, carefully, not because I was tired, but because I wanted to remember the feeling of this moment. The hallway outside was warm with sunlight, and the floor beneath my shoes clicked gently with each step. No one stopped me. I didn't turn around, not to check if they were watching. Not to second guess, because I wasn't carrying this burden anymore. I wasn't dragging their choices behind me like a shadow. I walked with both feet in the present, back straight, spine tall, not cold, not hard, just free. And for the first time, in a long, long time, I felt like I had stepped back into my own name. It started with the sound, just the faint scrape of gravel beneath shoes too soft for the walk. Then a small sniff, sharp and quick, like someone trying to tuck a feeling back in. I set my mug down gently and pulled the curtain back just enough to peek through. There she was, sitting on the edge of the curb, hugging her knees like a girl, too old for it, but too broken to care. The fog hung low over the grass, clinging to the shrubs like it was trying to hide her. But I saw her before she even looked up. I didn't move. Didn't rush. Some grief doesn't need a door flung open. It needs stillness. So I stayed there behind the curtain, heart steady and hands still, waiting for her storm to settle, just enough for me to breathe in it too. Her face was streaked, black rivers of mascara tracing the edges of her pride. She didn't wipe it away, didn't even try. She just sat there, shoes sinking a little into the damp edge of the driveway. There was no fire left in her posture, no sharpness. Just a woman, unraveling. Not for show, not to win, just unraveling because she didn't know what else to do anymore. I watched from the porch, wrapped in my sweater, coffee cooling in my hands. She wasn't polished like she used to. The one with perfect lipstick and too tight smiles. She was just human now, and something in me softened, not out of pity, but recognition. Even in the chill of morning, I knew this wasn't a performance. This was surrender. Her voice was barely louder than the breeze. "I didn't know you mattered this much," she said. And just like that, the fog felt thinner. Didn't answer. Not yet. I sipped from my mug and let the words sit between us, warm and fragile. Sometimes, silence speaks louder than a speech. I watched her hands twist in her lap, waiting for a reaction I didn't give. But inside me, something shifted, not forgiveness, not yet, but space. Like an old chair finally moved aside, making room for breath again. Her voice cracked, but her gaze didn't drop. She meant it, and I heard it. I stayed on the porch swing, didn't get up, didn't walk toward her, just sat, warm, mug cupped between both hands, letting the steam rise into the morning air. She cried, quiet tears, no sound but the soft drip onto her jacket sleeve. I didn't flinch. I wasn't being cruel. I was still. I've spent a lifetime rushing to fix it. To comfort. To fold myself smaller so others could feel bigger. But not this time. This time, I stayed seated. If she wanted grace, it had to start from her end, too. I watched the fog wrap around the porch steps and let my feet swing gently with the rhythm of the wood. Sometimes strength is knowing when not to move. She didn't ask to come in, didn't plead, didn't explain. She just sat there, still. The silence stretched between us like a line hung out for laundry. Nothing flapping, just air and waiting. There was something different in her shoulders. Not collapsed, not proud, just held. Held like someone who'd finally learned how to sit in her own discomfort without handing it off. A leaf drifted down between us. The breeze stirred it slightly, then left it alone. I glanced at her, then back to my mug. She was carrying her, part this time. And even if she never said the exact right words, I saw what she meant in her quiet, and that mattered more. The fog had started to lift, just a little. The porch warmed beneath me, slow and steady. She stayed on the curb. I stayed. On the swing. No one moved. I didn't walk away. Didn't open my arms. Just sat with her, from a distance, letting the silence do what words couldn't. Sometimes pain needs space. Sometimes wounds close in the quiet. She looked up once. I met her eyes. That was it. No nod, no smile. Just acknowledgement, and in that breath, something settled, not fixed, but steadied. I gave her stillness, and in doing so, I gave us both something we hadn't had in a long time. A pause, a chance, a beginning. I had polished the table the day before, lemon oil rubbed in, slow circles until the surface gleamed. But even in the late afternoon light, I could still see her fingerprints. Not literal ones. The kind left behind in the tiny scratches, the way her old chair creaked just before she sat down. She didn't say much. Neither did I. The soup simmered. Behind me, the scent of thyme and garlic weaving its way through the room like it was trying to loosen something between us. But all I could really hear was the tick of the clock above the stove. Louder than it had any right to be. She smoothed her napkin onto her lap, her eyes fixed on the bowl I'd placed in front of her. No compliments, no complaints, just presence and, honestly, that was more than I expected. We were both there, not pretending it hadn't happened. But not picking at it either. Sometimes a shared silence is the only bridge left. She stirred the soup gently, over and over, like each circle might bring up the words she didn't know how to say. The spoon tapped against the side of her bowl, soft and rhythmic. I watched the steam curl up between us like the breath we were both holding. She didn't apologize, not out loud, but it was there, in the way she stayed, in how she didn't reach for her phone or glance at the door, in how her eyes lingered on mine just long enough to say, I know. And I didn't press, didn't try to fill the air with questions or invitations to explain. Sometimes staying is the apology. I reached for my own spoon, took a small sip, and let the warmth settle in my chest. She offered silence, and I accepted it like a folded napkin. Across the lap, neat, quiet, enough for now, because healing doesn't always sound like words. Sometimes it sounds like someone is still sitting at the table. He hadn't said a word in nearly 20 minutes when he asked it. Did the hydrangeas ever come back? It landed so softly I almost missed it. My hand froze mid-reach for the salt. My throat tightened in that sharp, familiar way. They did, I said, voice low, bloomin' like they've got something to prove. He smiled just a little. They were always stubborn. I looked at him, and for the first time in a long while, I saw my son. Not the man who stayed quiet in the lawyer's office, Not the boy who let silence grow heavy, but the one who used to pick those flowers for his grandma just because they made her laugh. It wasn't really about the garden, it was about saying something that didn't hurt, about reaching across the table without scraping an old wound. And in that one sentence, he'd planted something again, a small, cautious seed of trying. She used to rock her chair back, tap her nails, adjust her hair every 2 minutes like it was a nervous habit, but this time she sat still. Not stiff. Just settled. Her hands rested gently on her lap, not clenched or folded tight. Her eyes stayed on her bowl, but they weren't darting or looking for an exit. There was a kind of peace in it. Not comfort, maybe, but willingness. The chairs didn't creak. The tension didn't rattle around the room like it used to. I felt my shoulders drop a little. My breath slowed. We didn't talk much, just a few notes here and there. A comment about the broth. A memory stirred up by the spice, but the quiet wasn't hostile this time. It was soft, fragile, like we were both trying to sit in the same room without breaking it. And for once, I didn't feel like I had to carry all the quiet alone. The bowls sat between us, steam now faded, the surface calm. Neither of us finished. Not because the soup wasn't good, I'd made it just like she used to like it, but because food wasn't the point. She set her spoon down gently, the clink against ceramic soft but steady. I watched her hands retreat to her lap. No napkin, dabbing, no fidgeting, just stillness, and without thinking, I did the same. We'd both shown up. We'd both stayed seated. That felt like something. I looked around the kitchen, heard the ticking clock, the soft scratch of the dog's nails across the hallway floor, the low hum of the refrigerator. Ordinary sounds, familiar ones, but now they carried a little more weight, a little more hope, because it wasn't just a meal. It was a pause, and in that mutual quiet, in those half-full bowls, we'd found a rhythm again, not the same one as before, but maybe a better one. When they stood to leave, there were no long hugs, no dramatic goodbyes, just motion. Quiet and careful. She looked back once, not out of habit, but with something in her eyes I hadn't seen in a long time. Recognition, maybe, or respect. Our eyes met, no tears, no big declarations, just stillness, the kind that feels like possibility. After they drove off, I walked to the sink, turned on the water, let it run warm over the bowls. The smell of dish soap rose up with the steam. I didn't cry. I didn't smile. I just whispered, almost without realizing, maybe the next chapter starts at this table too. It wasn't certain. But it wasn't grief either. It was something in between, a tiny crack of light in the doorway. And this time, I didn't feel like I had to walk through it alone. Most evenings, I settle into the swing like I never left it. The wood greets me with a soft creak, not from strain, but recognition. Like it remembers the rhythm of my weight, the way my knees tuck slightly to the side, the sigh I let out once I sit. The breeze moves gently across the porch, brushing past my shoulders, lifting the hem of my robe. I can smell the lilacs blooming along the fence line, faint and sweet, like a scent half-remembered from childhood. I lean back, let the slats press against me. They're not comfortable, not really, but they're familiar. Out here, time moves, slower. So do my thoughts. Inside, there's always something that needs tending, but out here, I can just be, just breathe. The porch swing doesn't ask questions, it just waits for me. And some days, that's all I need, to be held, even if it's by wood and air and a memory that creaks with love. It clicks on by itself now, the porch light. Right before the sun dips completely, that little lamp flickers and hums to life. I used to flip the switch by hand years ago when Jacob was still in school. I'd light it so he wouldn't come home to darkness. He doesn't need that light anymore. but I still leave it on. Now it's less about someone finding their way home, and more about keeping space ready, just in case. The glow stretches over the welcome mat, soft and golden, not asking anything, just waiting. I hear a moth flutter near the bulb, drawn to something warm and steady. That's what I want this porch to be, warm and steady. A place that doesn't chase or beg, but stays lit, because readiness isn't about expectation. It's about love that keeps the light on, even when no one is walking up the path. There was a time when I craved it, that simple, overdue apology. I'm sorry, Mom. I played those words in my mind like a song I hoped would start, soft and redemptive, but they never came. And one evening, as I rocked gently on the swing with jasmine filling the air and the chimes tapping quietly above me, I realized I didn't need them anymore. Not because they wouldn't help, but because peace wasn't something I was waiting for. It was something I was growing, here, in each breath, each swing, each star that blinked into the night sky. I didn't wait for them to make it right. I made it livable. Sometimes healing doesn't come from others. It comes from deciding to stop hurting at home, and I've built something better in its place. Some nights, I set out 2 teacups, one for me, one for the space beside me. I drink mine slowly, letting the steam warm my palms. The other cup sits untouched, quietly cooling in the early night air. It's not sadness, it's space, a quiet invitation with no pressure and no timeline. That second cup is my way of saying, if you ever come back, not as children trying to prove something, but as people willing to sit and speak softly, I'll still be here. The chairs don't rock, the table doesn't creak. Everything holds still, and in that stillness, there's room, not for explanations, but for being. That second cup may grow cold by the end of the night, but the seat stays open, and that, to me, is grace. Forgiveness doesn't knock on the door. It doesn't announce itself. It drifts in, quiet, slow, like the hush that comes after sunset when the birds go silent and the sky turns lavender behind the trees. You don't even know it's arrived until you realize the ache has dulled. The edge has softened, and you're no longer angry. Not because what happened didn't matter, but because it no longer owns the temperature of your evenings. I learned that out here, rocking gently in the swing as cicadas hum and light fades over the fence line. I didn't force forgiveness. I didn't chase it. I just made space for it to grow in me, and slowly, quietly, it did. Now I sit here, not with pain, but with a softer kind of remembering. And that, I think, is the kind of peace you earn, one quiet evening at a time. People think second chances arrive in big moments, a knock at the door, a tearful hug, a dramatic change of heart, but I've learned they don't. Second chances rise like bread dough, slow, quiet, alive beneath the surface long before you notice. This porch swing has risen too, back from silence, from loss, from waiting. So, have I? I still sit here, night after night, under this soft porch light, letting it spill down the steps like a welcome, not with expectation, but with readiness, because readiness is different than hoping. Hope aches. Readiness waits with calm hands. If the door opens again, I'll be here, not the same, not bitter, just steady, and I'll have enough room to start again. Not because they deserve it, but because love, when it rises slowly, knows how to make space. Sometimes, the quiet things, like porch swings, old teacups, and soft forgiveness, hold the most meaning. If this story reminded you of someone you're still leaving a light on for, I'd be honored to hear it in the comments. And if you'd like to, sit with me again sometime. You're welcome to stay.